We are live now, and we're going to record in three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I love talking small business with people, and I see what's going on with technology, AI. I see the big companies getting stronger, and I see a lot of bad guys involved with the big companies. So it's kind of scary to see where this world is headed, unless I think we adopt the entrepreneur mindset and we have more of a service mentality applied to our life to progress and to help others. Therefore, we can't be replaced so easily. And I think our next guest agrees. He wrote a book called The Profit Paradox: How Thriving Firms Threaten the Future of Work. The author is here with us today, Jan Eckhout. Thanks so much for being here, sir.
It's my pleasure, Mike.
Well, let's start off with actually, let's start off with this title, The Profit Paradox. What does that mean?
Well, it's basically a paradox that I think I can best describe by telling you about a meeting I had with a friend of mine. I hadn't seen him for a long time. This is now about a couple of years ago. And after I kind of asked him about his family and things like that, I say, how's the business going? And he says, it's not good. I mean, I'm moving out. He was back then based in Silicon Valley. He had had two startups, and he had decided to move out of Silicon Valley, out of startup world, if you want. And he said, it's not working. It's not working for me, but I also see around me the people that I've known and I've been interacting with that things have changed. I mean, startups are not doing as well as I thought they would. Now you think, of course, a startup is a risky business. Some fail, some make it, and a lot of them fail. So maybe it's just one of those who didn't make it. And as we were talking, we were in a bar that was in New York. We see on the screens it was CNN. We see a news anchor talking about the Dow Jones reaching 30,000 at that point. And so the news anchor says, "This is great news. This is wonderful because business is doing well." And so I see my friend Alex. My friend is shaking his head and he says, "Not for me because this didn't do it for me." I didn't see it that kind of good news show that we're seeing being promoted here on CNN because of the Dow Jones reaching 30,000. And as he's talking, also the waiter comes and the waiter says, "Look, I've been doing this job for more than 15 years, and the wage I take home today is exactly the same as the one I started at." And so what is the paradox? That on the one hand, you have a good news show, the show that says, there's high profits, firms do extremely well. On the other hand, you have small businesses, startups, people doing kind of a service job who don't see any of those gains. And that's really what the profit paradox is about. That these profits are there and no one contests that they're there, but that they're only there for a select number of firms. There's actually a small number of them. We see in the data there's probably about 400 or 500 globally, many of them in the US, but they're all over the world. And second, that most businesses have a much harder time today than they've ever had. And so that there's even, within the group of entrepreneurs, there's the ones who are very happy and very few who've done extremely well, but most of them really suffer in terms of getting their businesses off the ground, being profitable, having a success. And that's really what the profit paradox is about. It's trying also to explain and document the facts on both sides, on the success side, what's going on, what's happening to profit margins, what's happening to basically the distribution of profit margins, because some do well, some don't. And on the other side, what's kind of macroeconomic consequences does this have? This has macroeconomic consequences for, as I said, a small business, and I guess we could talk about this later about people in service jobs, people in production jobs, and that's really kind of in this summary the story of the profit balance.
Well, in your book, there was a graph, I think, right in the beginning of the book, and it shows how productivity is skyrocketing, but wages are not. And to me, when I look at that, and maybe I'm a little different, I think that's an entrepreneur's dream. Oh, you mean to tell me that I can create a business, become more productive with automation and software and programs and different technological advances, and you mean to tell me that my labor costs will actually be down? Oh, that sounds good. As long as I'm an opportunistic individual, I could see opportunity in chaos. So are you telling me that the average entrepreneur is actually struggling more so now than ever, even with all these benefits that we have?
Yeah, I mean, indeed, we see productivity and wages diverging, but the gains or the companies that can actually reap the gains from that are only these very large ones. And they're the ones, all the names that we know, also some that you probably typically don't hear of that are also in there. But it's not the case that all firms, across the spectrum of sectors and sizes have those benefits, because it's ultimately a double kind of decision or competition, if you want. You compete in order to attract workers, and so you like to pay as little as you can, and this works well for Meta or Google as much as it works for your small business to attract cheap labor. But then there's the other thing: what can you sell, and which markets do you get a foothold in? And that's really the problem that we're seeing, that these dominant firms have basically effective monopolistic positions, and these monopolistic positions mean that they really don't face any competition, can sell at prices that are way above cost, whereas these smaller firms, they cannot enter these markets because typically, you mentioned technology, the entry costs are high. It's a winner take all market. There are what we call network effects that, if I'm on a social network or a platform, the more users, the better it is for me. I don't want it to be small. I want it to have really depth and a lot of volume and transactions as a user. So that means that I want something big. And that means that, I'm not going to have an eBay and a Yahoo auctions properly competing because, eBay has 95% of the market and Yahoo auctions is just at the fringe. And these network externalities, technological differences, startup costs make it that if you're a small firm, you really don't have a decent chance to enter into those markets.
I like the quote in the very beginning of your book from Adam Smith, and it says, labor was the first price, the original purchase, money that was paid for all things. Paid for all things. It was not by gold or by silver, but by labor that all wealth of the world was originally purchased. When I read that, number one, I like Adam Smith stuff. When I read that, I think of, okay, well, if labor is the one thing that is where wealth will always be, right? There will always be money somewhere. You just got to find certain industries or positions or opportunities that are going to be one of the last things to be replaced by AI. And I look at plumbers, service-based businesses. I look at even with our book writing company. Book writing potentially might be taken over years from now completely, but building the funnels, all the service on the back end, running the ads, that's going to be somebody required to kind of pull it all together. And so that service is going to always be in demand for at least a very long time. So when I look at that, I say, oh, well, I just got to find places in this world that there is still a labor intensified position. And I would think that some people think that this is, there's a way to fix it. I don't know if there's any way to correct this. AI technology, whether we like it or not, is coming to sweep this world into a completely different direction. So it's either get on board or die. Is that how you look at it, or what do you say about that viewpoint?
I mean, first of all, totally, we have to get on board. We can't just, stand on the side and just wait and see what happens. I mean, we'll have to keep running because if we stand, we're losing out. That's for sure. Now, at this point, apart from saying a lot of things are going to change, I don't really have a good idea in terms of making predictions what labor work or what we do on a daily basis is going to look like in 5, 10, 20, I mean 50 years. I have no idea, and I don't want to speculate because we didn't know 100 years ago that we would be sitting in front of the screen and talking to each other 5,000 miles from each other. I mean, we had no idea that this was possible, and it happens. And the type of things we do today were just, not even predictable 30 years ago, if you want. So a lot of things will change. Now, one of the things that I'm very convinced of is that technology is going to do a lot of good. And I always say technology is in the movie of the economy is the hero and the villain. It's the hero because it does a lot of good things. I mean, the way, all the benefits we have. I mean, and you can think about just how technology, in terms of the things that we hold in our pockets and hold in our hands and how we sit in front of computers, but it also cancer treatments, if I think about how the new technology has increased the probability of survival, even if you're diagnosed with one of the worst cancers, that's just mind-boggling how much advance there is and how much our quality of life has improved. And so that's the hero part. Now, as technology is moving fast, as you were saying, entrepreneurs, what they want to do is they want to make a living, and they want to make investments in order to kind of move forward that technology. How do they do it? They save basically on labor, because typically labor is going to be the most expensive item in your cost.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the nature of making progress. And that progress means that we continue to change what we're doing. We don't know what we're going to be doing in 5 or 10 years, but we know that we have to change. I'm not so worried about us not being able to do anything at all. There will always be work. One is that, there's, if I go to, I don't see yet how we're going to do it if you're going to be at sports events without stewards. I mean, I don't see how security is going to be fully taken over.
Right.
There's, service to retirement homes, kind of, not nurses, but people who are wheeling around the elderly. I'm sure that there's robots who can do it, but ultimately we will have personal and individual interactions. So there will be always a demand for many types of labor. What I'm more worried about is coming back to the fact that if in this push forward, kind of on the hero side, where this technology does a lot of good things, we don't ensure that there's at the same time competition going on, and not a limited number of individuals or firms can reap all these benefits. Then, of course, the labor that we're going to see over time, and as it's been evolving over the last 4 decades, that's going to, keep on doing worse and worse relative to that push forward. And it's not just the labor; it's also, by the way, the small businesses and the entrepreneurs, except if you're Zuckerberg. But all the rest are going to continue to kind of suffer from that kind of dividing of the pie. And that's really what we're growing the pie by having technological progress. And then, we have to kind of somehow have a market that ensures that this division is done in a competitive way. And this is something that I'm much more concerned about. What AI is doing is really making this technology more and more kind of potent, much more kind of dominant, such that, if you want to run AI models, it's not that you need the software, you do need it, but that you can find in the scientific magazines. What you really need like very enormous power. You need fast chips. You need like physical technology, which are the barriers to enter into these markets. And not everyone in a small company has the deep pockets to invest in those. And I think that's the biggest concern. Why is that a concern? Because it's increasing that gap between the productivity, which is keeping on growing, and what really the kind of the share that's going to the small businesses and to workers is going. And we see that that's going on at the moment, but whatever we see in terms of the future is looking more and more like that. And I think that's more of a concern to me than what exactly we're going to be doing. I think there will be always work. We'll work less hours. That's clear. We'll have more leisure time. We'll be able to travel. We'll be able to do a lot of other things. We go to sports and theater and whatever you want. But ultimately, there will be work for enough people. The only thing is, is it well remunerated? Is it decent work? And that's going to be more of a problem. Now, there's one simple way. I mean, I say simple, not that I mean that it's simple to implement, but there's a way in which we can actually make sure that the pie is competitively split, and that's to think about ensuring that there is competition in these markets. If you have a dominant position as a firm, as a platform, as a social media site, well, we have to think of a way in which we can bring back that competition, because you're exploiting your monopolistic position, and it's that monopolistic position that's causing all the distortions that we see in the market for startups, small businesses, and so on.
So I am not a big fan of the Zuckerbergs of the world, and the Jack Dorseys and Jeff Bezos. Not a big fan per se of his politics and how he does things. However, I do believe in incentives and rewards. And even though I'm not a big fan of even like Bill Gates, I will admit these people have made my life better, right? Zuckerberg gave me something where I can connect with people. I was able to build a business online because of that. I'm able to use Microsoft Word because of Bill Gates. That changed my business and writing. Jeff Bezos allowed me to upload books to turn people into bestsellers to get that word out there pretty efficiently. So I owe a lot to these guys, crazily to even say. But the way I look at it is, you can't stifle any type of growth based off of maybe them becoming successful and rich. So in my opinion, even though I don't like their politics, I'll say keep getting as rich as you want because you're making the world better. And the only solution to me is incentivize more entrepreneurs, create a culture of entrepreneur minded people, make entrepreneurship cool again in schools, and then also create some type of an incentive or reward for those people to start businesses with maybe tax benefits or whatnot. So I think maybe the only way up is to increase more competition, maybe basically from the bottom up, give entrepreneurs some type of an incentive. What do you propose as the solution?
First of all, I totally agree. We need more entrepreneurs. In fact, what we're seeing is we see fewer of those. Now, in line with what you're saying, if Dorsey, Zuckerberg, Bezos, if they hadn't done it, someone else would have done it. So you would have had
maybe, right? Jeff Bezos, come on, he changed the game though, right? I mean, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe.
I mean, good. It's something that we will know. We will never know. So it's a what if. But the fact is that this technology was changing, and people were on the lookout. And some people, it was very much a winner take all environment. If you were lucky, I mean, and the other thing you have to give it to them is that they have been competing, really fiercely to get there. They had luck, but they were also making the right decisions at the right time. They were doing a lot of this stuff correctly. But here's one thing that we have to keep in mind. I mean, this is going back to Joseph Schumpeter from more than a century ago. I mean, he argued that if you think about what a growing, innovating economy needs, is that you need these incentives and rewards for, innovation. Otherwise, if I don't get the incentives, why would I do it?
Right.
But he made one thing that many people forget, and he made one point, which is that those rewards have to be temporary. That is, I get into the market, I invent something new because I'm the first one. I get to exploit this monopoly position that I have until some people around say, oh, but you're making nice profits. I want to kind of compete in that market. I want to do something similar. So there's this learning, this kind of observing how people are doing. And so basically you start to be able to, in a way, kind of enter that market because you see the success of that market. And Schumpeter made a point, those monopoly rents should be temporary. Now, if I have a natural monopoly, as we call it, a monopoly that's there forever, whether that's electricity generation, whether it's transportation, whether it's telecommunication, whether it's oil exploration, whether it's rail transport, which are all examples of what we call textbook natural monopolies. That is, you really want the largest scale possible. Now, then you can't have a Schumpeterian type of creative destruction. You can't have further innovation because the one who's the gatekeeper, and whether it is Zuckerberg today or whether it's Bezos today, or a century ago, JP Morgan or the Carnegies or the Mellons or whoever you want, they were all sitting on natural monopolies. And they managed to, after they had the benefit of making that innovation and pushing forward the frontier in terms of technology, they were at the same time also doing everything to stop competitors in. And this is the image I like to use. This is coming from Warren Buffett. Some students, when he was giving a talk to some MBA students, and they said, I want to be a successful investor as you are, Warren Buffett. What should I do? What's your secret? And he says, I think of a firm or a stock that I want to invest in. I think of that firm as being a castle, and I want that castle to be strong and well built. And I want to be someone. I want there to be someone in charge of that castle, a duke or a duchess, who's really knowledgeable, who understands how the castle operates, and who's going to take good care of it. But the most important thing, he says, that I want that castle to have is a huge moat around it. And I want the duke or the duchess to work on keeping that moat big, if possible, making it bigger. And because he was giving this talk in Miami, he was saying, I want you to throw an alligator or even a shark in there, just that I don't want people to get close to that. And the idea of building a moat is how you make profits. But this is going against the long-term kind of competitive nature, because if you manage to establish a permanent moat around your castle, that's great for profitability, but that's not good for innovation anymore. That's not good for further growth, because these companies ultimately kind of stall and stop doing novel things because they have this moat. Now, of course, there's no technology that's completely shielded forever. Then maybe 50 or 100 years later, they get wiped out in one way or another, I don't know, canals in the late 19th century. Then you get trains. Of course, the canals were these moats and local monopolies, but then the trains just, new technology took over. But the point is that as at a given point, there is no competition, the innovation that you had initially, however fierce that was, is ultimately leading to kind of stagnation, and is causing that lack of growth that we can only have if we have proper competition. Not only competition for the market, what we see a lot. Google had to fight, like crazy to get to the position that they were competing like crazy for the market. But once they had that monopolistic market, they are not competing in the market. And what capitalism is really is about competition also in the market. It's not just about the competition for the market. And I think that it depends really on what the nature of the technology is. If that technology gives you a natural monopolistic position and natural advantages just based on the fact that you need big scale, or because you have these network externalities that we were talking about earlier, then you have a problem. And it's there that I think, the success of entrepreneurs that we see do extremely well is well deserved, but it's also in part based on this, kind of long-term dominant position, which is really anti-competitive.
Are you a religious man at all, sir?
I was brought up as a Catholic, but I'm an atheist at the moment. So.
Gotcha. So yeah, you were raised as a Catholic. You probably heard of the story of the talents. Am I right?
Yes.
Have you heard of that? And they call it the Matthew principle, but to break it down for everybody out there listening who's not aware of this, it's basically the quote: "To those who have everything, more will be given. To those who have nothing, everything will be taken." And the story of the talents, basically, individuals were given talents. Some people did something with them. Other people saved them and stored them so they didn't lose them. And the master comes back and says, those who did something with these talents, you are going to be given all the talents from the other people, because those individuals didn't realize they had a talent and they didn't use it to multiply and create, valuable additional pieces of service or products. So when I look at that, I say, you know what? Maybe there's something biblical here, where you look at these people who have the talents and they figured out a way to constantly multiply their talents, and an object in motion stays in motion. So the people who are constantly producing, it's like they have this mindset that is completely against those who maybe work the 9 to 5, right? It has nothing to do with actually the resources that they have. It has to do with the way they look at the resources. And it's very much like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I'm looking at one of your chapter titles called The Rich Suburbanite, Poor Suburbanite. I'm like, oh, I think he's going to be talking about like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So when I look at that, I say, you know what? It's probably the mindset. And no matter what happens, if something is told to Jeff Bezos, he has a mindset to problem solve it. Case in point, Rockefeller. I don't know if you mentioned him, but Rockefeller was told he has a monopoly. You have to break it up. Well, he fought it like hell. And I'm not a big fan of Rockefeller with everything he's done, but God almighty, that man took that, broke up his companies, and then became 10 times richer, right? So it's like, hey, you try to stop him, but he just became even more powerful. So the way I look at it, it's the mindset. And I don't know if you can really take away the mindset from anybody. And so I just don't know, there's no way to stop it. My only solution is get that mindset that they have and instill it in many people, right? Create this mindset of let's multiply our talents. But I want to go to the chapter right before the one I just mentioned, the gold watch myth. What is that? Because I saw that, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had the book in front of me. I would read that because that sounds interesting. What is this about?
I use this image of the gold watch because it used to be that your grandfather or anyone in your family, say 1 or 2 generations ago, would have worked for the same company from day one, and then they, when they retired, they get a little party in the office, a golden watch from the CEO or whoever the boss is, and they get a handshake, go off, and that's kind of a little bit of the dream type of job of an employee, not of the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Now it turns out that people think that this gold watch idea was something that was true in the past is no longer true now. This is not something that we see now. First of all, no one gets a gold watch anymore. What does that mean? It says that the myth is that we think that jobs lasted forever in the past and now they're very short duration jobs. Well, the facts are it's exactly the opposite. What we see today is that jobs last much longer than they used to 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Wow.
Okay, so that's why it's a myth. Now, it is true that, your grandfather probably did get a gold watch at some point, and there's still people today, who maybe not getting the watch, but who have one job for life. But we see that overall, on average, the duration of jobs is about 1.5 years longer today than it was, say, 30 years ago. So the average duration of a job today is 4.5 years. It was 3 years 30, 40 years ago.
Wow.
So this is, why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because this is one of the things that if you talk to economists, we're trying to understand what is happening to the environment in terms of how fast people change jobs. Now, you'd say not changing jobs might be a good thing, but it also means that you get less promotions, you get kind of less flow through of new jobs and therefore new ideas. And so this is something that also, people are concerned about, because there's this notion that people might end up being in the wrong jobs for too long. And this is something that we see. Why does this happen? Well, it's related to the fact that we don't have enough small firms. Because if you have all these large firms, you don't move jobs that much. If you're in smaller firms, well, you might be in a successful one and stay there and it grows and then you move on to a different firm, or it might fail and then you have to go to another firm. And so having new dynamic firms has an implication for how fast people change jobs. And that's kind of one of the big facts that we see in the data, that people are now actually changing jobs less than they used to. And this has got to do again with this idea that we don't have enough startups, that we don't have enough dynamism in this environment of entrepreneurship. And this dynamism, by the way, is not just translated in the fact that jobs last longer and that therefore there's more what we call mismatch. You're in the wrong job potentially, but also that there's these younger and smaller firms, they grow faster, they innovate more, and they hire more people, especially young people. And so this is one of the things that we worry a lot about, is that this what we call business dynamism, innovation, and hiring young people and kind of turnover of people is going down, because this is having long-term implications for growth, because ultimately growth comes from innovation. It can't come from anywhere else. And if more innovation, of course, people say, of course, the big firms, they innovate a lot. Yes, but they are big firms. If you look at innovation per worker or innovation per dollar of sales, the innovation by the small firms is much bigger than it is by the large firms. And so we basically see, by having an increasing number of these dominant firms, we see a decline in innovation, and that's something that's to be worried about. So let me say that the gold watch myth is kind of a smoking gun of all this dynamism that we don't see, that we should see for a vibrant economy.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and play on the other side a little bit. What do you say? Well, maybe this is even my side. This isn't a different view, I guess, but how much do you believe the regulations and push for a higher minimum wage has motivated businesses to say, okay, I'm seeing where this is going. California is asking for a $50 per hour minimum wage. Why don't I say to myself, let's go a different direction. Let's build a business based off of robots, because this minimum wage is only going to go up, but these robots, I pay for them one time, it's done. So the higher the regulations, the more insurance, the more taxes, the more everything that's required to hire a person will desensitize or
Incentivize.
decentivize. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Decentivize the business from ever even thinking about labor cost anymore. Do you believe that plays a major factor? Because I do.
I mean, of course, it depends where the minimum wage level is, right? If you add 50 cents, it's probably going to make a big difference. And if you make it a lot bigger, then it does make a difference. What we see, and I think this is interesting, is that the minimum wages tend to, at least at the levels where we've seen them in the last few decades, it's changing now because the levels are getting bigger. So we don't have that data in yet. Didn't have much of an aggregate effect on the economy. But we do see that it's different for small and large firms. And surprisingly, the minimum wages are actually kind of good in the large firms. Why? Is because these firms are what we call exerting some kind of monopoly power. For the small firms, it's a different thing because these small firms don't have that power over their workers,
Yep.
whereas the big firms do. And that's why there we see a difference in the impact, whether you're working in a large firm or a small firm.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yeah. So yeah, basically there's two different worlds is what you're saying, right?
That's
Business
right.
is not business across the spectrum.
That's correct.
And so I mean, I'm a small business advocate. I say get as many entrepreneurs in this world as possible, because once you have the entrepreneur mindset, you can create multiple revenue streams, and therefore you are not tied to one corporation for your entire life. So whenever it comes to the future, can you paint me the picture? Obviously, you've done some research. What are you seeing? Is there any really scary trends? Because I'm seeing individuals jump ship from company to company pretty frequently. I'm seeing people go to school, and I guess maybe that's going to be one of my other questions. How much does education play a factor in this? Because I'm seeing individuals going to school, 52% of them are getting jobs that have nothing to do with their degree right now, and it's only going up. So education plays a factor, but also the rent my life philosophy. Rather than have a car, let me just lease a car. Rather than own a house, let me just rent my house. Rather than have a job or career, let me just jump from ship to ship every couple of years.
I mean, in a sense, we've become much more flexible, kind of adjustable. You know, the economy and the technology is facilitating all of that. I mean, it's so easy now to, as you said, you know, I don't have to save up to be able to buy a car, or I don't have to save up. I can just I can be in the rental world
Yeah.
all the time. And I think, as you said, education plays a big role. I think education is important. We see that the education world, as you say, you know, a lot of people, you know, do things that they're not educated for. What the education market, if you want to call it like that, has become is very similar to the entrepreneur market. It's become a winner take all market, which means that, you know, even if you've done college, even if you've done kind of postgraduate studies, you've done a master's, you've even done a PhD, it's not clear that you're going to do well economically. It's not clear that you're going to have a salary that's kind of, you know, kind of consistent with that level of education. You might get it, and the ones who do get it like, you know, extremely well. They do extremely well. What we see is that, you know, in terms of success, if at this point you're coding anything that has to do with AI, if you know any of the, you know, the technology that's underlying it, I mean, you're just on top of the world, because they all after you. Whatever you do, you're going to get extremely well paid. But it's not the case that, you know, everything in IT and in information technology is now well paid. There's a lot of people who actually, you know, barely get by, because, you know, there's a lot of help desk positions. There's a lot of kind of stuff that's being done, the type of coding which is more standard traditional coding that's being done at the moment, that's not terribly well paid. And so what we see is that, even, you know, it's not just within the kind of the world of entrepreneurship, but it's also within the world of work. You see that there's, you know, superstars. You get winner take all kind of markets where, if you happen to be in demand, you're doing extremely well. All the rest, and more, a bigger share of these people are not doing so well. And this is something that I think is going to, you know, get even more pronounced over time, because the technologies becoming not only kind of winner take all on the entrepreneur side, but, you know, all these ideas from artificial intelligence, all these ideas of scale being important, are getting more important, are getting more relevant over time. And so I expect that we're going to see more and more of that. If you're, you know, but it's an athlete or a coder, if you're on top of the game, on top of the world, you'll be a star, the superstar. If you're not, you're just mediocre. And I think that's going to be something that also in society we're going to have to deal with. I mean, that type of polarization. It's great to say that there's this wonderful athlete, there's this wonderful coder, but if 99.9% of the people who are aspiring to be that are going to be disappointed, are going to have a tough life, this is also creating tensions and a form of polarization within society. So this is something that we have to think about for the future.
So one of the chapters you have here, the future of work, but also plenty of reasons to be optimistic. In my opinion, the future looks very similar to a world that mediocrity will not be tolerated, right? Because the moment mediocrity arises, they're gone because someone or something can replace it. So I look at it as it's an exciting time, in my opinion, to be alive. So you're very optimistic, it sounds like, or there are a few things in this book that show that it can be a very optimistic approach. So what would you like to convey to our audience about that?
I mean, look, I'm very much pro technology. I'm very much pro technology. I'm pro technology. I'm not saying that everything should be Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia is an interesting example. It's the fourth or the fifth biggest or most visited website ever, or at the moment in the world. And so basically that's, in a sense, a huge success, but it doesn't have a kind of a monetizing model behind it, because that was a choice, because it was a community platform. And so the community at that moment decided we don't want to monetize it. The founders tried it, but the community didn't let them do it, because the founders themselves could not run Wikipedia by themselves. They needed this community. But there's a lot of things in between. And I think we need that type of, new technologies. We need the innovation. We need also the innovation and the ideas of all these people who've been extremely successful. But at the same time, we have to keep our eye on competition. We have to keep our eye on making sure that we don't create natural monopolies, right? We don't create these castles with a moat around them, because having a temporary moat, having this Schumpeterian idea of a temporary monopoly is all fine to give the incentives to innovate, but really in the long run we have to also work on leveling the playing field. We don't want to play soccer where the field is kind of running down, where one team has, instead of 11 players, has 15 and the other one has 7. I mean, that's not competition. And at the moment, it looks a little bit like that. We need to create a level playing field and then really have proper competition. Now, things change and things are moving fast. So in a sense, I think as a society, we have to keep our eye on making sure that there is competition for the markets and there is competition in the markets. And that's going to be to the benefit of small firms, of innovators, and of ultimately of long-run growth. And that's, I think, the objective.
Competition cures all. I agree. It produces the best version of yourself. And also, the more competition, the better the prices, the better the quality. That's why I'm a little scared of the 15-minute cities. I see those individuals who are pushing for it, and they don't even realize they are crushing competition by doing that. And therefore, there's one place to go, right? One place to shop. And, the more competition, the better. So the moment you remove that from society, bad things will happen. So outside of your own book, is there one that maybe you recommend to our audience that maybe changed your life, a defining moment? I brought up Rich Dad, Poor Dad for a reason. It put me on this path. It allowed me to see the two different mindsets. Anything like that for you, sir?
A book that changed me in terms of my job. I mean, there's other books that have changed my life.
Anything you recommend that maybe either changed your viewpoints on things or so exciting that maybe drew your curiosity in that direction? Any standout?
There's a book by James Surowiecki, who used to be a staff writer for the New Yorker. And he wrote a book basically, I thought, very insightful about how markets work, why, and also how they fail and why they fail. And it was called The Wisdom of Crowds, and it was very much focused on the idea of markets being a tool for aggregating information, for bringing out information. That's, I think, one of the great things about markets. He wrote that 15, 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. So, but it's still, I mean, I still recommend it to a lot of people because it's got great insights. And if you see it with new technology today, if you think about what new technology does, it's all about information, access to information, and having markets mediating that is actually a wonderful idea. That's the whole idea of having competition in the market.
Got to check that book out. Never heard of it. Do you currently live in Barcelona?
I do, yes.
Oh, very nice. All right. So, is there a website or a social media channel that you recommend? I think you're on Twitter. I think I read that. Is that right?
I'm on Twitter. It's just it's my name, so Jan_Eekhout. And if you want to know more about the book, there's a website. It's www.theprofitparadox.com. There I have all the data. If you're a nerd like I am about data, you can download all the stuff. You can, play with it. You can rerun all the code. I have the code. I have the figures, so you can play with that if you're a nerd like that, and if not, just read the book and you don't have to play with the data. So.
Oh, nice. So theprofitparadox.com. I'll be able to see the data because that's what I'm most interested in. I'll check that out.
All right.
Excellent. Jen, I have to say, this is awesome. I wanted to see where you stood on some things, and it seems like we share the same views on most of it. So it was an honor to talk with you. I love the title of it, The Profit Paradox. And thanks so much for sharing your insight with our audience today.
Thank you for having me on.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life.